I feel like being part of the what do you call it? The song festival, because I keep getting in people from all around the world. But I give you 12 points already, right?
I can start singing The Sound of Music if you like.
So after having done that Eurovision, you're calling in from the UK, right?
I am, yes. Sunny Oxford today.
Don't let your accent fool anybody. You're from the UK. So the stage is all yours, Gerhard.
Okay, thank you very much. And before we get started, I'd just like to say a very big thank you to Patrick, to Dialog Group. I love your events. Now, this is the first digital event we've done, but I've been to this event and its previous iteration for quite a few years now, and I always love them. They're always very slick. They're always very exciting, full of energy. So it's great to be here, and it's fantastic to kind of share the stage with you. And as you said, hopefully next year in person again. I don't see my slides at the moment. I presume we're going to come. There we are. Perfect. So I want to talk about customer service and what and how we can reimagine that a little bit in light of the discussion we've had all day already. And that kind of starts with customer experience. So the quote here by Forrester is a few years old. The full quote is, "In the age of a customer experience matters more than ever." Now, in fact, at the time, that was true at the time, and it's even more so true now with the pandemic, and it's in fact it's shifted digital, and there's no going back. And in fact, Forrester is thinking very hard of changing this period from the age of a customer to the age of experience. They haven't done it yet, but I think they're going to head that way. And that goes on to the points which Greg was making earlier in his presentations, which Casper was making as well in his outline of the trends we see, and the fantastic panel discussion you guys had, where a lot of these points were kind of coming through very, very strongly. So we have customer experience is a key priority for organizations, over half of them now after COVID. And most customers want to self-serve and they want to use digital tools. And we need to help them with that. At the same time, that is only a good experience if that is a digital experience and if it is a seamless experience integrated into all different things. Now, that's the starting point. It's all about customer experience. Customer interactions become about customer experience. I love the statistic Neil was just sharing around one in three customers will leave you after one bad experience, even if it's a great brand. And I can fully emphasize with that. Empathize. Next slide, please. Now, before we get to thinking about how we can reimagine this, I want to highlight that, in my opinion, or arguably, customer service is the most important battleground for customer experience. Why? Because this is the kind of thing which is most important to the customer, much more so than acquisition or marketing, which clearly matter too. But customer service is when the customer has a clear need, and it could be a problem, or it could just be something they need to solve in some other way, something trivial. But this is where it matters most. So if you go to the next slide, please, let's think about how we can reimagine customer service. Now, before I go into that, I want to share with you an experience I've had in the last few months, which kind of illustrates a lot of the points I want to make and the kind of discussions how we can maybe improve customer service very clearly. Now, about the beginning of the pandemic, I bought a printer. A printer for the home office, obviously for obvious reasons. And when I got it, it worked. I used it 4 or 5 times and it stopped working. So, okay, that wasn't great. I tried a few things. I switched it on and off again, did a few suggested stuff on the troubleshooting website, couldn't get anywhere. And I called the customer service center to get technical support. Now, that was quite a long process. They gave me a case number. I had to wait a long time. And then finally, I got somebody who couldn't fix my problem and declared the printer dead and said, okay, previously they would send somebody out to come and repair it. But then because of the pandemic, that wasn't possible. So I had to ship it back. So at that point, they said, okay, you need to call our returns team, and they send you information about how you can get the printer back to us. So I got transferred to that returns team. I got another case number. I had to explain the whole issue again. They in fact tried to fix the problem, couldn't do it again, and then finished the call. They sent me instructions how to ship it and print it back. Now, in those instructions, it was an email which said, here's a label which you have to print out and attach to the box and send to us. Okay. I looked at that and thought, well, I can't print this out because my printer is broken. So long story short, I called them back. I had to quote both my case numbers. None of the case numbers had their full information in it. Eventually, I got to somebody who understood it, and they said, I can't help you. The only way I could solve this was to go to a neighbor, ask them to print it, and then post the slip through my letterbox. Because of the pandemic, it was slightly more complicated. Anyway, I think this illustrates very clearly what the kind of things we have to improve and reimagine. And if we go back to the slides, please. If you look at further forward, please. And again. And again. So if you look at a typical experience, which is still sadly the case so often, you call in, you always have to start from the beginning. As I've just had in my example, I called at least 4 times. I always had to explain everything again from the start. The information I had wasn't available to the agent. I had 2 case numbers. They didn't know both case numbers. I had to point them towards it. I had to repeat myself. It didn't solve my problem. And then I kind of had irrelevant messages as part of that. So this whole experience shows a lot of areas for improvement. Clearly, it's so frustrating. 87% of customers find it frustrating when they have to repeat themselves in every new channel. Clearly, that is something we all emphasize with, I'm sure. And at the same time, I want the agent to see what I see. I want to be able to not have to waste my time to go through that again and again. So what I want to focus this talk about is kind of how can we reimagine and improve the customer service around some of these points. Now, the key improvements we can make, given what we do and the kind of technology vendor we are, is clearly around communications. But there's something we also need to consider as organizations first, and that's kind of how we measure these things and our attitude to customer service. So if you go to the next slide, please. And that kind of requires a shift, a rethink of how you respond as part of customer service. So too often it's still a case of, okay, how many calls can I fit into a time period? How many calls per hour can my agents do? What's the average time per call? What's the kind of cost I have per call? Rather than thinking of more customer experience metrics, which are along the lines of how satisfied is my customer? And more importantly, have I solved the customer's problems? So how often does the customer have to call in before the problem is solved? Have I provided a good service? It says here somewhere in these metrics, first call resolution. But in fact, that can go even further to 0 call resolution. How good am I with my customer service to stop the customer from calling in the first place? And the key there to bear in mind is not necessarily to reduce the cost to the call center for the call, but to improve the customer experience. If I stop the customer calling because I can help his problems easier and simpler somewhere else, that is a key win for everybody, and that will definitely help. So beyond all the technology and beyond all the kind of improvements we can bring, that is a key factor of how we can engage and how we should be thinking about customer service. And as I mentioned, customer service is absolute key for improving these, for improving customer experience and fighting that battle around that. Next slide, please. So what I've got 3 sections I want to touch on, which kind of show how communications and how you kind of create communications and interactive communications can help rethinking customer service. The first one is to do with these digital experiences around different channels. And the key thing there to bear in mind is they have to be seamless. And now this is something you've seen in Chris's presentation already. I want to just emphasize that again, because here we have a customer journey, which Chris went through Veronica's customer journey, which looked at a lot of different channels and how she was interacting with the organizations. Most of these interactions were, I guess, customer service interactions. And the key thing is to make them seamless. It helps if you have a unified platform where the business user can create all these communications and can see where the steps in the journey are and putting them together. So you have on the one side, you have the ability to very easily create emails in a compelling way, which for the person creating them look the same as we look for the person receiving them, and they're quick to change. They can pull in the personalization elements, the creative assets. It's a very, very smooth process. Likewise for the SMS. And the key thing I would like to highlight very strongly, and we talked about it a few times already, and a couple of people were asking about it in the booth, is using video. So video is a fantastic tool for marketing and engaging customers, and also creating emotions. There was a comment earlier where people were talking about you have to make sure you get the tone right and the emotion right. Now, video in itself, particularly if it's done right, is a very emotive tool because it connects us visually. And in addition to that, video is, yes, it's good for marketing, but it's even better for customer service because it's really good at explaining things and making sure that people understand complicated things in a much easier way than, say, in a document. So, for example, if a customer joins and I send them an onboarding video, as is the case here, that has much better results in customer engagement, in customer actually following through with the onboarding journey and maybe downloading the app and things like that. But also when a customer has a policy or a statement, having a video which explains the most complicated things as part of that is really useful to have. So most of our use cases in video are explainers, onboarding, as well as kind of single reach out. So for example, we talked about this in the booth as well. We have a number of insurance companies who are using video. I think there's a use case in the Netherlands as well with Vivat, where video is being used for renewals. Now, this is a situation where you have very few interactions with a customer in a year, except where maybe there's a claim or something, but in general, there's just a renewal. And so using a video as part of that has fantastic results because it improves the interaction, it increases the customer experience, and improves the customer service as a result of that. And finally, particularly with the pandemic, where a lot of call centers were obviously struggling, chatbots was a lifeline for a lot of organizations. So getting a digital communications in order to keep the lights on was kind of the first order of the day. And Greg shared an example of companies panicking. We need chatbots in market within a few days because otherwise we just can't serve our customers. Now that's done, but that's not going to go away. So customers are used to using chatbots. They're used to interacting digitally in this kind of interactive way, just chatting either with a bot or various other devices. But the key thing is, if a chatbot is done right, it can help a lot of problems. And I'm going to share a bit more about it in a minute. But it is important that if it goes wrong or if a chatbot can't help, that it's then seamless and easy for the customer to escalate to a person. So that human touch is absolutely critical to have when it's needed. Otherwise, you might as well not bother at all because you're just ruining the customer experience and not providing customer service. Next slide, please. So going back to that point of what I mentioned earlier, can we actually stop people calling the call center as much as possible? Can we answer questions where they occur? And as an example of that, I want to mortgage proposal. It's a complicated document. And say, for example, I'm looking at this, I'm logged into my banking portal. I've got a session of where I can see all my interactions, all my communications. And this is one of them. It's a mortgage proposal. Click again, please. And again. So oh, so one of the things to bear in mind is a lot of questions are triggered by kind of the same documents. Kind of so some parts of documents, 80% of questions come from the same 20% of things in a certain document. And so one of the things you can do is essentially have a contextual chart, which is indicated here. So you got the little bubbles on the left here, which indicate, okay, there is a chat which refers to just this part of the document. And that is, and if a customer clicks on that, it opens up a chat window which identifies, because we're in the portal, who the customer is, what document we're looking at, what section of the document we're looking at, what is all the other data we have about the customer, and what are the most common questions about this particular section of the document. So in this case, the customer was clicking at a section where it has to do with repayments. It's a mortgage proposal with a certain amount of interest and a certain lifetime. And the most common question is, can I repay earlier or can I pay more? And so the customer can immediately, if the question is one of those, click on that and get an answer, which is like, okay, yes, you can pay more. And in fact, you can pay up to 20% more, because that's relevant to your specific proposal, to your specific interest rate, and to your specific design. And looking at that, you've got a similar way of how that looks in responsively in a mobile or kind of tablet device, and where there's a chat button. So for each section, you can very easily insert a contextual chatbot, which helps the customer to answer the questions where they are. In the same way, you can send a customer a PDF form or PDF with contextual chat links in there, where the customer can click on that. Okay, there may be some more limitations on what you can answer based on how much data permission you have at that moment to talk to the customer, but nonetheless, you can answer questions around specific areas of communications you send to the customer, and which trigger the most calls to the call center and kind of resolve them before the customer ever has a need to call you. Click again, please. Yeah, so this is something, and if you come by our booth, we can show you a bit more about this, how you can insert these contextual links into documents and increase a whole range of metrics, not just around customer satisfactions, but also around questions answered and around call resolution into the call center. Next slide, please. Now, the final section I have is that's to do with making interactions count. As in, here we are at a stage now where the customer has a question which we couldn't answer through a chatbot or through a video or an email or anything else. They actually called the call center now, and now it comes to actually giving them a good service. So next slide, please. And the reason why the call center is still critical, so we heard it from Casper this morning, and we also heard it from Greg, where when the situation is critical, or if there is a problem which can't get resolved in a kind of immediate way, the call center or the telephone is the most preferred channel people have to resolve a problem. Because I guess that's the only way available right now when you can't go into a branch or anything like that, where you can actually talk to a person and talk it out with a human being in that. So when the customer calls into the call center, next slide, please. So what needs to happen? First of all, we need to continue that seamless experience. And that's something which obviously we do on our platform, but you have an immediate repository of all the interactions and the context of the conversation, the extended conversation with the customer. So what have they done in a different channel? What is the reason for their call? Because maybe they're coming from a chat. Maybe there is something outstanding. Maybe they have two case numbers, like in my case, and they should be appearing as one, rather than having to run them simultaneously. as an agent, you need to be able to see all the communication the customer has received. So that needs to be retrieved instantly in the same way the customer sees it. So because a lot of the questions might be, okay, I have got a bill and I don't understand my usage on the second page, that little pie chart. If the agent can't see that pie chart, then the question becomes a lot harder to answer. So having the ability to access the profiles of the customer, the kind of transition data they have, but and the behavioral data, as well as analytics data, things like understanding we have about the customer. Maybe they are earmarked for a specific offer, or they are kind of eligible for something. All of that available so that the agent can carry on their experience in the best way possible. Next slide, please. And in addition to that, there's something which is really quite important. And I know some of you are Engagement Compose users, so you may or may not have that functionality where you can create interactive documents in the call center with an agent with a customer on the phone. So from a kind of centrally managed template store, the agent can actually build a document in real time with the customer on the phone using a range of drop-down menus, pre-filled fields and things like that, which are in line with corporate guidelines, with branding, with GDPR, and kind of answer the customer's query then and there, create a document which kind of illustrates that. There's also a range of options where the agent potentially can enter free text or things like this, and then send it to the customer in real time if the customer is still there to verify that it's all okay. That way, the interaction can be resolved on the call. There doesn't need to be a callback. There doesn't need to be a call out later with the different communications. You can verify with the customer then and there the issue and move them on to that, really delivering great customer service. And we're happy to show you some of that in more detail in the booth as well. And with that, I've got one more slide, I think, or two more slides, if you go to the next. So I just want to summarize. Customer experience is key now, but customer service is the most important aspect of customer experience, in my view. But having said that, we are in a world where customers expect to self-serve, but that self-service experience has to be digital, and it has to be seamless and automated and simple as much as possible. But when it goes wrong, we don't have you still need the human connection more than ever, in fact, when we're all at home and so on. And there are different options for that. Live takeover, certainly, goes to the call center. Video can help with the emotional aspect of things like that. But the key thing as well, when the customer comes and talks to you, then it's important to make it count. So it needs to be in real time, it needs to be interactive, and carry on that frictionless experience from. And we like to help you by taking you to our booth afterwards and showing you a bit more of that in detail. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Gerhard. And what I find really interesting is the way you described, let's say, bridging almost the gap between the physical and the digital world by inserting those little balloons into a PDF that you then can click on and enter a contextual chat, because that was something that I think could really help even older and more traditional customers in easing into that domain. You've told us about getting the customer experience right and getting it right the first time, and that has been a recurring theme, so to speak, this whole day so far. What would you recommend to customers or to professionals in the field on using, let's say, the customer itself in designing those use case and interactions? Because analytics, like you discussed, will show what happened afterwards. But let's say, how would you propose designing those interactions beforehand? And in getting it right the first time?
So that's a very good question. That goes into the process of how you kind of put these experiences together. So one thing you should certainly do, and the nice thing is with a lot of the tools nowadays, you can is involve a customer in it. So because a lot of these tools, and customer mentioned that as well, including ours, of course, are cloud-based. They're very easy to create these experiences. They're very easy to see where experiences goes wrong, but more importantly, they're also very easy to change and tweak. So you can see which things work, and you can see where customers have feedback, or which experiences do not work for the customer, and then you can change them. And that's certainly something where we see a lot of, say, in quite a few customers, we're deploying chatbots, and then the first chatbot never survives the kind of first contact with the enemy, if you like. It gets tweaked and changed, but you can do it very quickly, and then grow it from there. And the same is true for other experiences like video and things like that. And having a tool to create kind of mobile communications, email communications really simply and easily, and allow a business user to tweak it, enables you to use the customer much more for feedback. And in my case, with the story I told, I guess my customer feedback was, don't demand people print something if they don't have a printer. But
well, yeah, I know that one, by the way. Yeah, I actually am surprised. I've got one of those Surface tablets with a digital pen, and I'm opening PDFs all day in Microsoft Edge, and then just drawing on them, my signature, saving them and sending them back without any guarantee, which is in essence, it says nothing, right? So there's lots to gain in digital signature, in improving the customer experience and making it more easy. Because the only other option would have been for me to print, sign, scan, save, store, and send it back, which is, I think, let's say that shouldn't belong in 2020 anymore, especially in this era. Well, a very insightful presentation. I don't know if there are any more questions.
There's one. So, yeah, here it comes. So, in an emergency, 55% of consumers across all generations resort to the phone. That's what we saw. What opportunities exist to improve customer experience when they phone with a problem?
Okay, thanks. That's an interesting question, and that goes back to what we discussed earlier, Patrick, around how can it be frictionless and how can you help? So, because I have the understanding of the customer calls in, I can recognize, as a simple example, from the phone number, if I have that, that's a customer who's just recently received a bill which was twice as high, as an example, and that might be the problem they have, so they're calling about it. So I can automatically maybe send him to a video or something which explains why the bill might be high, or send them to a different team which is likely to deal with that issue. Or even better, to go back to serial resolution, I know I'm sending this customer a bill which is twice as high as normal. Why don't I insert one of these nice little bubbles in the bill, and then say, click here to find out why your bill is so high this time, or something.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one, yeah. And of course, you could use, for example, that's one I just came up with, you use chatbot internally to help that call agent, or to get the right answers to the customer quicker, instead of having to look them up in manuals or requiring extensive training. So it's a combination, yeah. Well, thank you very much, Gerhard. Looking forward to meeting you in person as well. Bye-bye.